Rotarians and guests, it is my pleasure to introduce to you today Dennis Leslie, the Senior Executive Sous Chef at the Hill of Grace restaurant, which is just on the other side of that glass over there. Here he comes. Now, I'm going to interview him, but just before I do, I just want to say a couple of things. Dennis does a lot more than cook at the Hill of Grace restaurant, which, by the way, is the only silver service restaurant in the world in a sporting stadium that is open to the public. Adelaide Oval, in fact, has 23 function rooms and 2,000 plus dining spaces, and Dennis has duties which are associated with all of this. Dennis's boss, of course, is our member, CEO Andrew Daniels, and he's not here today, which is, you're probably happy about that. No, yeah. But I was talking to Andrew's PA, Leonie, this morning, and she was aware of the fact that Dennis was going to speak to us, and said he's one of the most popular people on the staff and one of the most easygoing guys, so I'll pass it on to you. Dennis, as you can see, is quite young, and if you read the bulletin, you'll see that he's very well travelled throughout the world to learn his trade or vocation. And as I spoke about vocations earlier on, I've said many times that our club has exceptional human capital in it, and if you stop and analyse it, you'd be astounded. In fact, you've heard us talking about doing our vocational profile. And I just want to mention this because what you're wondering, what's this got to do with Dennis? Well, today I'm going to use the interview techniques that we use when we do a Rotarian's vocational profile, and what we do is we want to find out, who the real person is, what their value and their uniqueness is. So I'm going to ask Dennis a series of questions using the same thing which George Hall would put us onto, an acronym called FORM, which stands for family. The F for family. Where has this person come from? Who are their early influences and what are their early influences in life? Their occupation, and of course the title today is A Day in the Life of Senior Executive Sous Chef Dennis, and that'll come out when we start talking about his occupation. But how did he get there? What was his journey? What does he do for recreation? That's the R. We all need life balance. We'll find out a bit about what he does. And finally, what are the things that motivate him? And these same things apply as we do the vocational profiles that we do, which is so valuable in our club. So I'm going to start off, I'm going to get Dennis to have that bit of microphone. Yep. Dennis, you have an Asian appearance.
Yep.
And yet you have an Anglo-Saxon name, Dennis Leslie.
That's right.
Tell us about your parents and any early influences in your life.
Right. So my father's Australian. He was born in Sydney, Woolloomooloo. My mother's from Philippines, from Manila. My father was an Olympian basketballer. You wouldn't be able to tell by looking at me, but he's about 6'2". My sister, the younger sister, got the height. She's about 5'11". So in one of the tours leading up to the Mexico Olympics, he toured the Philippines. My mum wasn't supposed to go to the game, the exhibition game that they were playing against the Philippines, but one of her friends got sick and asked if she would go in her place, and so she did. That's where my mum and dad met, and from there they kept in contact through, not emails back then, but through letters and stuff like that, and they ended up getting married in the Philippines, and then again in Australia. So that's pretty well my background. In terms of where the cooking and where my sort of influences came from, my grandmother used to live with us when we got here into, when my mum came over, my grandmother came with her and pretty well lived with us until later on, until we're teenagers. So I can remember, since I can, walk, my grandmother used to cook breakfast at 4 o'clock in the morning, which was ungodly hour, but she used to get me out of bed at 4 o'clock in the morning to watch her cook, and she'd ask me when I was in primary school, she'd ask me what I'd like to have for breakfast, lunch and dinner, and cook it all in that 4 a.m. sort of time slot before everybody went to work. So from there, I pretty well grew up beside my grandmother, and she was a terrific cook, and my mum is pretty good in the kitchen as well, and so are the aunties that later came to Australia a few years after my grandmother and my mother were here. So learning from my grandmother, my aunties and my mum how to cook traditional Filipino food. My dad's Australian, didn't really like a lot of the Asian sort of flavours that my mum was cooking with. There's this little shrimp paste that's called bagaong, and it smells like, I don't want to say it. It's not quite PC, but my dad calls it bugger off, because you're not ever going to get that anywhere near my plate. But my mum sneaks it into a lot of her cooking, and my dad doesn't know that it's in the food, so that's the only way that my dad will ever eat it. So he does eat bugger ong, but without him knowing. So yeah.
So Dennis, I understand you went to Brighton High, and at school you had some specific interests and hobbies. Maybe can you tell us a little bit about
Sure.
what you did in terms of your hobbies and interests at school?
Sure. So coming from a Filipino background, all Filipinos love music. They sing at every occasion that they can. Even when I'm cooking in the kitchen, I tend to belt out a few love ballads in there. So I went to Brighton High, which is predominantly a musical background, so you have to do music to get in there. But also, whilst I was going through high school, I also played cricket. Played cricket for Glenelg, opening bowler for Glenelg whilst I was in high school. But my main sport that I really played was good at basketball, but I just knew that I wasn't going to get to the heights of my dad. So I ended up playing lacrosse. I wanted to get to the point where my dad sort of got to. So he got he's a Hall of Famer in Australian Hall of Fame. He's actually an OAM, Order of Australian Merit, for services to basketball. I wanted to get to that level in terms of my sport, but not quite the OAM yet. I've got 5 states cap and 1 Australian cap for playing lacrosse, so close enough.
I read on the internet a blog that you have written where you said, amazing what you do.
Yeah.
Come out. And it said, when you look back at your school books recently, the only thing about it is that your girls phone number is some teenage love letters that never made it to the intended.
Yeah, that's a bit romantic, isn't it?
How did you go to school academically, and were your parents happy with your progress?
Look, it was very hard during school because I was committed to sports pretty well 6 days, 7 days a week. Sometimes I played for the South Australian Sports Institute. I played for the local team the club team. So I was also playing in the junior division and the senior division, and also playing for state and country. So that really took up my days at school. So I trained before school and after school most days. And then I had 2 or 3 games, usually on a Saturday and a Sunday. School was very, very hard to try and fit in. It wasn't my priority, but with my mum being, an Asian background, with a lot of Filipinos, school and education is the forefront of what the kids have tried to achieve. So I had to get good grades. My deal was if I got a B or a B plus, that was good enough for her. So my grades fluctuated between a C plus and a B. But I ended up going to university, so it got me into university doing accounting. Got nothing to do with cooking, has it? So well, now I cook the books, yes.
I also noticed that you learned a little bit of money at McDonald's.
Yes.
That's where you started. But can you tell us how you actually came to get into chefing? And you said you went to university and did accounting and you gave that up, I presume.
Yeah, quite an interesting one. Again, going back to that Filipino-Asian background, my mum really wanted me to get a tertiary education, so it was very important that I go through university. So I was doing accounting or commerce in university, and at the time I was doing breakfast shifts at McDonald's. So I was going to 4 o'clock in the morning, doing breakfast, and then ending up going into my first lecture at 11 o'clock in the afternoon and stayed at university till about 2:30, 3 o'clock. Then I'd go play lacrosse. And that was ongoing until I, thought that McDonald's was a little bit too of a baby sort of a job for me, and I wanted more of a challenge, and I ended up working at the Hilton International as a dishwasher. And it was at that job where I was helping the chefs plate up and, do general duties like peeling onions and carrots and things like that, that the executive chef actually asked me if I wanted to become a chef. And probably the wrong question to ask, because I really loved cooking and I really wanted to pursue that career. I thought it was exciting. I thought it was one of those jobs that I don't know if you've ever seen a commercial kitchen or been in a commercial kitchen, but it never stops. The pressure is just relentless. The amount of people that go through the kitchen, and it's just all of these things that sort of interest me. It's just, fast-paced, and, being in that sort of environment really excited me. And working with so many great people like, Simon Bryant and Cheong Liew and Ernst Schutt, one of the great pastry chefs of South Australia, it just sort of, it was a no-brainer. Much to my demise of my mum, I ended up studying at Regency to become a chef, and that's where it took off pretty well.
And I understand that you also did travelling around the world and came across a few places. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, sure. So, Europe was, to get to where you want to be, Europe is the key to, all the restaurants, or how you want to, become a great chef. You learn from the best, and Europe is one of the best countries to learn very technical types of cooking. So I ended up working with a guy called Raymond Blanc, who has a 2 Michelin Star restaurant, and he's the guy that actually taught Marco Pierre White. Marco Pierre White taught Gordon Ramsay, so that name should be synonymous to everyone. So I ended up doing a couple of years with him, and from there just travelled all around Europe and North America until I came back 5.5, 6 years later, and then started back at the Hilton, right down the bottom rank. So that was a bit of a hard pill to swallow.
Okay, and then you got a job here at Adelaide Oval.
Yeah. So I spent 10 years in Adelaide Hilton, on and off, 5 years here, 5 years there, and I'd go off and, my first stint was 5 years, and then I went over to the north, which is Kununurra. I don't know if you're northwest of Australia, and ended up cooking down there at a resort. That's where I learnt a lot about native Australian ingredients, working with the local Aboriginals and just the local people about what food they can harvest from the land. Came back to Australia, Adelaide for 2 weeks, went over to Europe for 5 years, and then pretty well started from the bottom again at the Adelaide Hilton. Did my second stint for 6 years and worked my way up from the bottom rank to the third top rank. And I knew that there wasn't a position that was, nobody was going to give up that sort of top position. So I ended up leaving there and I started at Blanco Restaurant, which is the botanic restaurant in the Botanic Gardens, and Blanco Catering. So I headed that up for almost a year, and then came back to Adelaide Hilton because Simon Bryant left, wanted to leave, and he wanted to get me back in as the executive chef. So I went back there for executive chef. And I was just out of the blue 3 years after that, I was just having a beer with one of the guys from Ben Swanson, the guy that pretty well operates the functions and events side of Adelaide Oval, and said there's a position available, there's a great restaurant up for grabs. And that's what drew me in, is the Hill of Grace restaurant. And I said, well, that's a no-brainer. And I didn't know that everything else came with the restaurant. So which is a bit of, yeah.
You're combining your love for cooking and your love for sport.
Yes.
That's one of the venues. My wife, Chris, and I celebrated our 25th anniversary here at the Hilton Adelaide a couple of years ago now. And we were blown away with the quality of the service, how the waiters explained the ingredients, how the chef had prepared each course. Everybody had a different dish, there was about 6 of us. And also how the wines that they matched with each course, why they matched that particular food. It was absolutely amazing. Now I've heard terms like molecular
gastronomy, yep.
And trickery in cooking. These obviously don't apply to you, but you obviously have a unique, special way of getting some really fantastic taste. Can you tell us a little bit about how that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just from the background that I've just told you, so I've, grew up in Adelaide Hilton, growing up with chefs like Simon Bryant and Bethany Finn and Cheong Liew, so you get that sort of Asian, European ingredients coming through. Then I went overseas and learnt technical French cooking, which is Michelin Star restaurant sort of type cooking, which is very, very technical and very... it's kind of like being in the army, I would assume. It's very regimental. It taught me a lot about discipline and also about French techniques. And then spending that time over in the north with the Aboriginal communities and learning about their ingredients and their food, and also growing up with with the Filipino sort of influences from my grandmother and my mother. So that is what Hill of Grace food is about. Australian native ingredients, French cooking techniques, Filipino flavours.
It's fantastic, I can only recommend it. But can you just tell us a little bit, Dennis, about a day in your life, when you do more than just cook at the Hill of Grace.
Yes,
you have
yep.
Any other duties? Just give us a bit of an idea what happens in a normal day.
A normal day. So Tuesday is probably the most hectic day for us, or for me. I get here at about 9:30 to deal with the admin side of the business. So it's all the planning and all the procedures, all the things that are coming up, planning for events that are 3-4 months away, that needs that sort of logistical sort of planning now instead of down the road. So just today, this morning, I got in at 9. From 9 until pretty well the moment I walked in, I've been working on functions that are in February, late February, and one of them in the government house. So, off-site, on-site, 300, 400 packs or people on those functions. So we've been costing them, we've been planning them with wines, how we're going to do it, how we're going to execute it. That was this morning. And then I got into the office just about 2 hours before here, and I've been costing all of those different things. After this, I've got a meeting with the GM and the CEO of Adelaide Oval to see how it's all going. And then after that, I've got the game. So we've got a game today at sort of 5 o'clock. But normally on a Tuesday, last Tuesday there was a game. So usually get in and then you do help the guys out cook 4,500 meals on a game day. So right now we've got about 60, 70 chefs downstairs that are going gung-ho about getting all of their chefs and all of their different functions. You guys are quite lucky on a game day to be in here, actually. I was actually astonished that they let anyone in on a game day. But there's about 60 chefs downstairs, 14 different breakout kitchens. They'll then execute them 4,500 meals in the space of about 25 minutes. So that's pretty well my day, and then I'll go home and relax.
So, life balance is a pretty important thing when it comes to stress naturally.
Yep.
If you let stress get to you. So we often hear that chefing is stressful. I've got a brother who gave it up because of the stress. And you often have these unusual hours. So what do you do to keep fit, keep your balance in these things?
Yeah, so 9 o'clock, 9:30 is when I get in. If I can get up at about 6 or 7 o'clock, if I can get up, I usually go to the gym beforehand. If I can't go beforehand, then I might sneak away. Last night I snuck away at about 8:45, got into the gym about 9 o'clock. But I tend to run on the treadmill for about 45 minutes, an hour, just to sort of let all the all the nastiness come out, and I'll just try and relax that way. I love tennis, love golf. I still would play cricket to this day if my back could, hold myself up straight. But, with this industry, it's bad on your knees, bad on your back, bad on your hips, bad on your ankles. So it's not really that kind of conducive to that sort of, long-term sports. Lacrosse is no longer a sport that I can play anymore, because if I get hit one more time, I don't think I would be able to get up. But sport still is a major part of my routine, and also my fiance and I love going around to wineries and different restaurants and seeing what they're doing. She's a mad foodie. She loves food and she loves wine. And we try and visit as many of those as possible to see if what we're doing here at the Hill of Grace is, where it should be in comparison to the top sort of restaurants that are in and around Adelaide.
Thanks, Dennis. You mentioned your fiancée. I understand that's being married very, very shortly. What's her name? How did you meet her? And do you cook for her?
In that order. Her name is Evelyn. I never really wanted to be involved with Filipinos, with Filipino women, coming from three sisters and my mum. I just know what they're like, and I ended up marrying a Filipino. So she's from the north of the Philippines, in Ilocos, in a place called Ilocos. She's a nurse. We met because my cousin and her were best friends, and we, just ended up going out and, as a group, and then ended up, going out as a couple. And then we've been together for a few years now, and a lot of my food is actually influenced by her parents, who cook very differently to mainland Manila. Her food is a lot more rustic, and that's what I love about the flavours. So a lot of the ingredients, a lot of the flavours that are in Hill of Grace are predominantly from that area, which is great. Teaches me another sort of area of cooking. But we're getting married on 31st of January, which is pretty soon. And our theme on that wedding is food festival. So we've got people like my friends who are cooking. So we've got Simon Bryant cooking some of his stuff. We've got Poe cooking some of her paella. Myself, I'll be cooking a couple of pigs on the spit. Some he's got to put Filipino style in there, and also some ice cream van is going to be there. So it's going to be a food festival, yeah.
Sounds great. Do you cook for her when you go?
Never. No. I teach her how to cook. She wants to cook. She wants to learn how to cook. And we go to farms. We visit a lot of farms. And we usually pick the things off the farms, our producers, our suppliers. Good for me because I get in contact with them. Good for her because she comes home with a bag full of produce, and then I'll teach her how to cook all of that. Because at the end of the day, moving forward, when we have kids and all that kind of stuff, I dare say she'd be doing a lot of the cooking. So, and she really enjoys cooking and enjoys food. So I'm quite lucky that way.
Dennis, usually at this time the president gets up and sort of tells the speaker's host that he's got to wrap it up.
Wrap it up.
He's up here. But just quickly, if you could just tell us, the last thing of the form acronym that George gives you, motivation. You're still very young and you've achieved a lot today. What do you hope to achieve in the future, and what's your vision and passion for the future?
Yeah, my passion and my vision is to one day perhaps get a farm and have a farm that's big enough to cater for 20, 30 homeless kids that would run the farm. I would love to sort of teach them the value in food and hospitality. Hopefully open a restaurant that is on the farm, that the farm produces all the produce that the restaurant then goes and cooks and serves to the public, and all run by underprivileged kids that I just believe that perhaps that it's a way to give young kids with not given the opportunity to get out of their the situations that they're in, an opportunity to learn something new, get them out of, give them some skills, give them some experience, and perhaps give them that opportunity to get out of that bad sort of, position that they might have inherited, born in, or whatever. So hopefully one day that's my goal. That's my personal goal, is to one day open that farm and restaurant run by these kids.
Thank you very much. We are running out of time, so
Yep.
no time for questions, but I'm sure that you can hang around for
Yeah, not a
minutes
problem.
if anyone
Not a problem.
wants to ask me a question afterwards. But look, I think today it's an interesting story, and I think the acronym that we've used to find out Dennis' vocation, we really understand where you're coming from. It's just wonderful to be a rugby club where we hear that sort of stuff going on in the background. Thank you very much.
Not a problem.
Members, please thank Dennis.
Wow. Thank you very much. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you very much.